Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Rethink Retail webinar, Fashion Forward Innovation, Tailoring Retail Tech to the Customer and Employee Experience. I am your host today, Alicia Esposito, VP of Content for Retail TouchPoints. And if anyone watching this knows me, you know I love this topic. It's something we cover extensively on RTP. It's something that I love to cover. And I love speaking with people who know this space, who know all of the dynamics, the trends, the challenges, and we are going to get into it all. Thrilled to have a great panel to help me guide this conversation today. We have Matt Redwood, VP of Retail Tech Solutions at Diebold Nixdorf, Marshall Kay, Global Director of Retail Transformation Services at Avery, Dennison, and Andrew Busby, founder of Retail Reflections, podcast host, keynote speaker, author, all of the things. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for taking the time out to chat today. So like I said at the top of this session, we are going to be digging into some of the nuances that exist within fashion and beauty specifically. More broadly, I think we're at this really interesting juncture for the in-store experience. We have surveyed the community and we have found that a lot of retailers are trying to better integrate technology into the in-store experience, right? It's just the reality. There's that convergence happening. But at the same time, there's the duality of better engaging and responding to consumer needs and also empowering and engaging the workforce. So we're going to be getting into a lot of the nuances there. But first, I think it's important to start high level. Marshall, why don't you kick us off? Specifically, I'm hoping you can kind of set the stage by outlining some of the key pain points and challenges that stores are facing today as they strive to spin all of those plates, so to speak.
Sure, that's a great question. It's important that we are cognizant of the environment in which retailers are operating. As we all know, there is a global labor shortage that retail is experiencing. And it isn't just that it's harder than ever for retailers to keep their stores properly staffed, the classic issues of attracting talent and retaining talent, but also what used to be an issue of it's just hard, it's really hard to find good people, now has become an issue of it's hard to find people. And so sometimes there's a relaxation of standards. You'll hear stories about a person who gets fired from retailer A because they've been caught stealing, who then get a job at retailer B, same things happens, or working at retailer C before long, things of that nature. Theft and the epidemic of crime, including violent crime, which is, I believe, more in North America than internationally in terms of violence in stores as well, is really an issue as well. And you can see how these things play with each other. So that's challenging in and of itself. And then you start getting into issues like the convergence of digital and brick and mortar, where more and more is being expected of the frontline employees in stores and store managers, especially as you have consumers leaning into in-store pickup, and as you see stores being expected to fulfill online orders for shipment out, which makes perfect sense. So what that points to is a heightened need for a store to be able to accurately and quickly find and locate their inventory, whether it's for replenishing the sales floor from the stockroom, whether it's finding a piece of inventory for in-store pickup or ship from store. That degree of precision is more and more important. And then, of course, you have checkout. And what used to be considered an okay checkout experience is suddenly no longer being viewed as good enough as we lean into just walk out, grab and go, and even faster forms of self-checkout too. So there are a bunch of different factors, lots of different pain points and pressures, and the macro factors play into it in a very large way.
Yeah, a lot of really great points. And I think we're going to be getting into a lot of them over the course of this conversation. And just to flag for you all watching this, there may be some points that you have some follow-up questions around, or you're looking for more specific answers to some of these questions, please feel free to drop those questions wherever you're catching this webinar. If we have some time at the end, I'll want to bring in some of those questions. So just wanted to flag that for folks. But I do want to dig into, despite all of these different points, right, where technology can have an influence, I want to dig into the customer facing aspects specifically. And Matt, I think you may have a perspective here, because we're hearing over and over again, the capabilities of digital have set new standards for in-store, specifically around the show me, you know me concept, right? And, we've seen some applications of this, some at different degrees of success. So I'd love your take. I mean, are retailers truly capitalizing on this opportunity of creating more personalized, more immersive engagements and experiences at the store level specifically? How are they stacking up right now?
Sure. So I think at a broader level, more can be done in this space. So to follow on from some of the trends that Marshall just highlighted, I think the one that really stands out to me as key in this transition is the staff availability. So if you go back a number of years and you think about, well, how would I personalize a customer's journey? You'd have a member of staff. And via intuition and experience, they would personalize based on what that consumer was looking for, what was available in store, and what they knew went well together. If you remove that member of staff from the store because they're no longer available, or they have to carry 5 different roles now because there's less staff in the store, you have to rely on other interaction points to provide that personalization. And I think that's where technology comes into a play. So, at a basic level, upselling could be seen as personalization. I think that's very easy to do. But I think where personalization really comes into its own is being able to identify who that consumer is. And then based on their shopping trends, their previous buying habits, or what they're actually looking for in store today, then personalizing that experience for that particular consumer. Broad brush personalization based on generic rule sets does not really work. If anything, it will drive the consumer the other way. What consumers want, and I think you said it in the question, is show that you know me. And show that you know me not only means that you can identify who I am, what I've bought in the past, what I'm looking for today, and what other products I might be interested in. There are a range of different technologies that you can use that, but I think it's important to start with really understanding, what does good look like for your consumers? Because every consumer will want a different experience. And I say it a lot, but no retailer should do technology for technology's sake. You've really got to understand, what does good look like for my consumers? And then based on the technology I have available, the staff that I have available, and the format of my stores, how do I use those mechanisms combined in the right way to deliver the level of personalization that my customers want in my stores?
Yeah, that's great. Andrew, anything you want to add there? Because obviously this is your bread and butter. This is stuff that you study and you report on and share every day. So, I mean, what are the opportunities? Where are the gaps right now? I'd love your take.
Yeah, well, I would say, first of all, that Matt's just done himself out of selling a whole load more SSCs. although plenty more went into my local supermarket just last week. So good for you. Yeah, personalization. I was really interested in the take you took on that, Matt, which I think is absolutely totally agree with. And I kind of go add to that by saying I think that retail, traditionally, it's been quite poor at learning from other sectors. So think about the airline industry. Now, obviously, there's quite a number of us who are quite happy to pay for much higher levels of personalization. And by that, I mean, whether we go economy, heaven forbid, or we go business or first class. And of course, if we go the latter, then immediately, in this case, the airline, but it could be a retailer, knows a lot more about us, and we get a different level of service and therefore a different level of personalization. So I think that going back to the sort of supermarket analogy and this would, if I walk into any store, I want to see the day when actually we are recognized when we when we walk into the store. Now, some people say, well, really, isn't that kind of a bit, kind of scary, kind of a bit snooping and stalking us and so on and so forth. But I think this is actually the challenge that retailers got, to do this without being intrusive. So it's a bit of a fine line, and we all have our conversations, whether they're social media or whatever. And of course, what a brand or a retailer has to try to do is earn the right to become involved in that conversation, so that they then can get involved with us on a one-to-one basis and personalize. And because we're talking about the consumer expectations, I'll finish for the moment on, I think that pretty much everybody now outside of the retail industry, if you like, so consumers and so forth, they know they've heard of AI. I'm sure that everybody has, although probably they have different understandings of it, but they probably understand that it can do so much. So why aren't they getting a better level of personalization? So I think what you've got is retailers are trying almost to play catch up with our expectations, which are continually growing and evolving, and probably keeping one or two steps ahead of the ability for a retailer to actually deliver what we really want. And bearing in mind that sometimes we don't know what we really want, but we know when we experience something that actually falls below those expectations that we've set.
Yeah, that's a good point. Perhaps those expectations are so innate that we don't even realize we have them until we either have an exceptional experience, right? That was like, oh, like they really went above and beyond. Or if you fall below that line, then it's like, no, it's not quite what I'm looking for. So it's interesting that that's kind of hardwired into us just based on all of the different data we've been gathering as consumers, which is through all of the different experiences beyond retail, right? Like even just like the services we use in our day-to-day. And Matt, I do want to double click on the point that you made around employee availability and how that's kind of a critical juncture, I think, in terms of building consumer trust in context of this personalization, these great experiences we're creating in store. Because if you can't find someone to even help you to start that conversation, then that's just like a big missed opportunity, right? So can you dig into like what is like where availability is today more broadly, and most of all, like what is impacting that potential from being reached and having those connections actually taking place effectively in stores?
Sure. So if I could just burst a little bubble first, as a supplier of self-service to the market doesn't necessarily mean that I think self-service is right for every single customer journey. But if you look at why it's been successful in other sub-verticals, it takes elements of the transaction away from a member of staff that could be handled by a consumer. And I think that's the bit that's really applicable to the fashion environment. There are not enough staff to provide good experiences in store. Where do consumers expect to have that good experience delivered? Well, it's out on the shop floor because they're looking for a product and they can't find it and they need some help. Or they have found an item but they want it in a different color, or they need a different size, or they've gone to the fitting room and they've tried items on and actually they don't fit and they need a member of staff to go and grab other items. Those kind of interactions are where the human interaction with a member of staff are really valued by the consumers. So I think the staff availability is an interesting one, because I went into a fashion store 2 days ago and stood and just watched what happened. And it was really interesting to see the peaks and troughs of busyness of the store. When the store was quiet, all of the members of staff went out into the store and they were putting items back on the shelves, putting them back into the right place. They were clearing up the fitting room. They were bringing stock from the back office and putting it on the shop floor, and they were helping customers. As soon as it got busy, within a couple of minutes of it getting busy, suddenly there was a queue at checkout. And so all of those staff then left the shop floor and were all then behind the tills processing transactions. And it was amazing to watch how quickly the store descended into chaos. Customers couldn't find items weren't put back in the right place, customers couldn't find members of staff. And so throughout the day, they went through these cycles where technology, I think, plays a part in this is it allows your members of staff to spend time where it matters most to the consumer. So if in an environment, delivering experience and being available to that consumer is what a consumer values as good experience, then technology plays a part in taking away from members of staff parts of the end-to-end journey that they don't need to do. Could a consumer scan their items, e-tag them, bag them themselves? Yes. So that stops then the flip-flop of staff having to run between checkout and shop floor, and means they can remain on the shop floor to deliver that good experience to the consumer. So, I think you've really got to look at your end-to-end consumer journey from interaction to end, and look at what are the points of interaction that we have today. Where are my friction points or areas where I'm not delivering a good experience? How can I supplement technology into that to then free up staff time and then redistribute that labor to where it counts for the consumer?
Alicia, if I could chime in really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think your point is well taken, Matt. And I think that it's really important that a store be ready to trade at the start of business each day, because there's going to be a need for the frontline employees in a number of ways at various junctures. And so when people think about customer service, customer experience, usually they think about the actual conversations in the moment. But as you pointed out, so much of it is behind the scenes, and people don't really think of on-floor availability of product as customer service. If an item comes in eight different sizes or 6 different sizes in a particular color, they should all be out on the floor for purchase if they're available in the stock room. And that's something that often doesn't get treated as a form of customer service. It's almost like being in a good restaurant where the best service is invisible. You don't even think about it. Something's there. And that's and retailers need to operate that way, because there's so much need for the limited amount of resource and frontline coverage that they have.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think the other point to that is giving consumers choice. Not every consumer is exactly the same, and the way that they want to interact both with humans, technology, and the brand is different. And I would never ever advocate that you try and force all consumers down a particular channel, which then poses an interesting technology challenge, which is how do I deploy technology that's flexible enough to serve different customers in different ways with different levels of staff involvement?
Yeah. I was going to say, I see you nodding.
I'm really interested in that. I think the points that Matt and Marshall made were absolutely valid. And also, what was going through my mind was that we know that nearly every single retail business is still driven by certain KPIs, the traditional ones. So I'm thinking sales per square foot. So we're talking in-store, sales per square foot. And obviously, when you're running a store, you keep an absolutely eagle eye on the number of hours that you're consuming, because we know that you're judged by that. And I just think, going particularly to what Matt was saying, that we really need to try to bring in what I call, actually refer to as probably the most important retail KPI, and that's how is not just my employee feeling, but how is my customer feeling? Now, somebody could say, well, okay, how can you manage? How can you measure that? Well, we know that there are ways to do that now, and I would like to see that have the same degree of importance, because I think then, to the point that you made, Matt, that then drives the level, because retailers, okay, at the moment they use NPS, which I think is a bit of a blunt tool. It doesn't really give the insights that they think it does, or assume that it does. So if we can give that, how is my customer feeling? Because we know at the moment, particularly now, post-pandemic, cost of living, interest rates, inflation, all those things that we know about, it's more difficult than ever before to attract and retain. And of course, that's key for every retail business, and conversion is key for every retail business. And conversion, I think the level of staffing, and perhaps we're going to explore this a little bit more, that the employee engagement, the level of staffing is directly, that's probably the biggest influencer factor on conversion. And every retailer that I speak to and I know of is trying to increase that percentage, that ratio. So I think it's a really, really key, particularly when we're talking about the fashion and beauty markets.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows how quick, I think, Matt, your anecdote is a perfect example of like how quickly it can snowball if employees aren't properly equipped to not just serve the customer, but juggle all of the other things that Marshall was talking about at the top of our conversation, right? Making sure shelves are fully stocked, managing any incoming, online orders that need to be fulfilled in store. If those, back end / under the hood touch points, so to speak, aren't addressed, then they're going to lose sight of all of that customer facing stuff that is so central to that in-store experience. Again, especially for fashion and beauty, which, very much is high touch. It requires exploration. It requires, a personal level of knowledge too, right? Because, I know how I shop, and sometimes that is a very intimate and personal experience beyond like, I'm just running to, this store to pick up a household item, or a cleaning product, right? So Andrew, I'm glad you brought up that idea of employee satisfaction and customer satisfaction being closely linked in this respect, right? Because I think it does have a trickle down effect. If the employee doesn't feel equipped and empowered, that's going to show up in how they speak with the customer and how they serve the customer. So is there anything else there that we can dig into, the interrelation between those two things, and possibly how technology can facilitate and improve those areas, especially as it relates to creating that more memorable and personalized customer experience?
Yeah. And so a number of years ago, I did a spell working with a workforce management organization. They were known as Kronos in the day, the UKG now. Other brands are available. But the encouraging thing is that more and more retailers are beginning to use that. And so what we mean, just very, very briefly, by workforce management is having the right people, put it in a very basic way, the right people with the right skills at the right time, and down to a very granular level, which could be in half-hour slots, going back to the point that Matt was making about those cycles that they were going through. And I was thinking when he was saying that about what workforce management can do, it can optimize, because I've been there. Again, this is a number of years ago, but so many retail business stores are run using a spreadsheet. It's quite, we think, well, really, is that still the case in 2023? Well, it is. So having that right, not just level of staff, but the ones with the right skills, because there'll be some who don't have checkout skills, for example, because they simply haven't been trained yet. So they can be on the floor, but they can't help with the checkout and so forth. So what your talent pool looks like for every half hour, or whatever, of every day of every week. And of course, we know that it's always different. So I think that will drive a different level of engagement. And then just briefly going back to the point about that relationship, I sense that in retail that we're now beginning to realize, and it's slowly shifting from, whereas before retail business from the center would largely treat its store workforce as a cost. It was a cost line, not an asset, and certainly not an ambassador for the brand. I sense that is slowly changing, which is a really, really good thing, because I think that it helps the customer, it'll help the retail business, it'll certainly help the employees, and it'll give the role of a store associate a different dimension, and people have a different perspective on it. And I'm thinking here of things like different flavors of clienteling, which, to your point, Alicia, about fashion and beauty, yes, according to the customer journey, because as the point was made earlier, I think it was Marshall, talked about the customer journey. And some, even for fashion or beauty, it might actually be a distressed buy, and we just want to rush in, and we know what we want, and we, pick up, I don't know, something for a wedding or whatever it happens to be. But probably most of the time, yeah, we're looking for a bit of help, a bit of support, a bit of advice, and so on and so forth. So that's a different skill set. And I think going back to customer expectations, we are expecting more and more of that. And now, in our minds, that equates to a great customer experience.
Yeah, that's a really interesting nuance there. It's like the workforce management ensures that, employees can focus on the things that matter, and can schedule and allocate those tasks appropriately. But there is a certain level of emotional knowledge and emotional intelligence that requires you to be able to spot someone that may, need a little bit of guidance or need a little bit of help. I know, like, all my expressions are like very clear as day, so people could probably tell. But I think, Matt, I do want to go a little bit deeper. So we talked about workforce management. As far as employee empowerment, what other technologies present the biggest opportunity, right? So Andrew mentioned clienteling. I know we've seen some really exciting use cases for AR in store, mobile POS, so many more. I could go on and on, but I would love your take first.
Sure. So I think there's a step that I think is missed when a lot of suppliers, technologists, retailers are looking to redesign their store. And that is that they put a lot of focus on the consumer journey, which is absolutely right. Everything that we do should be designed around optimizing the consumer journey for the consumers that are coming into that particular store. The element that's quite often missed is there are staff journeys. And staff journeys exist in the same space. They're quite often well intertwined with the customer journey, and sometimes they're completely separate to the customer journey. It really comes down to what are all the tasks that we expect a member of staff to have to do in the store, either process or operational tasks, or customer journey tasks, or customer experience tasks, or checkout tasks. It's really important that you design both of those journeys, or you define both of those journeys at the same time. And then really find technology that's going to help members of staff. And you mentioned AI. We're doing a lot in the shrink space in AI at the moment. And if you go to NRF or any other trade show, there are hundreds of providers that are providing shrink-based solutions for AI. But what a lot of them actually overlook is, well, what happens when I identify theft in a store? What am I expecting my member of staff to do? And how do I empower them to deal with that situation in the best way? So, a piece of AI that might either enrich the consumer journey, it might deliver efficiencies or remove a loophole like shrink, has to be well designed and linked to the devices that you put into the members of staff's hands. Because if they don't feel empowered or they don't have the right information when they need it, they can't deal with that situation in the right way. And quite often that puts them into a heated or very delicate situation that they have to try and navigate. And that's not really fair on the member of staff. So you've really got to design these two customer journey and staff journey at the same time and make sure that they complement each other.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, go ahead, Marshall. I was going to go to you next.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in on that. There's another technology called RFID that we should be talking about too, because it has really quietly revolutionized fashion retail over the last 5 to 7 years, and is poised to do the same thing with beauty and cosmetics and fragrances, etc. There are already some retailers who are doing great things with RFID in beauty and health. And it isn't just for inventory management, where the degree of inaccuracy is often even greater than it is with fashion, where you've got 30 to 40% of SKUs where the count that the retailer thinks it has of that SKU is different from what's in the store. With beauty and fragrances and cosmetics, often it's even more. Often you can have half of your SKUs in that position. So basically, to keep it relatively short here, this is helping retailers and frontline employees know exactly what's in their stores, know what's on the sales floor and in the stock room and in what quantities. So it's helping the frontline store associate access inventory quickly and efficiently. And we live in a day and an age where it isn't even just that consumers often know more about the product than the store associate who's there in the store. It's not even just about attributes of the product itself. Now it's even about product availability. Consumers expect retailers to be able to indicate whether what they're looking for online or on their phone is in the store, and with greater precision. Now they're expecting the frontline store associate to be able to deliver on that too. I mean, they expect the retailer to deliver, and it's the frontline associate who's the one experiencing that in the moment with the consumer.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think RFID is a great example of a technology that actually enables benefit in so many parts of the consumer and the staff journey. You know, as Marshall said, not only does it allow you to be more efficient and effective in what stock have you got in your store and where it's in the store, you can use it as a scanning replacement at checkout. So suddenly when the consumer gets to checkout, it's a much more efficient and pleasurable journey to check out of the store. As well as there are so many other supplementary technologies that can use RFID once it's actually deployed to the store, be it a returns loop, be it tracking whether an item has been stolen or bought, using robotics at night to go and collect all the items that are in the wrong place and either put them back in the right place or put them into the fitting room ready for the members of staff in the store. So for me, RFID is really much, it's an enabling technology that then enables so many other supplementary technologies that then enrich both staff and consumer journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that phrase, the silent enabler. I know we covered Good American's first flagship and how they have fitting room technology that is powered by the RFID tag. So that product is recognized once they go into the fitting room. So then the consumer gets not only, you know, more detailed product content, and, you know, they can call an associate if they need help, if they need a bigger size. And that's where like that product availability comes into play. But it's also product recommendations. Like if you're trying on a pair of jeans, like try on this top with it, or, you know, try on this supporting item. So there's that ability to not just, you know, get what you need about that one product or get that size you need. It's let's build this whole outfit, which, you know, most fitting room experiences today, not that great. So if technology can facilitate that and kind of be that connecting point between the customer and the associate who's already doing all these other things, that's a win for everyone. And I guess that kind of connects us to our final portion of this conversation, which is this balancing that needs to take place between technology and all of the power, the data, the automation, with the human touch, right? Like these two things need to be intrinsically linked here. So Marshall, I'd love to go to you first because you talk about RFID kind of being the silent enabler, and, you know, the power for the associate. How do you strike that balance? You know, how do you explore the true role and value that technology can bring to your unique experience and to your unique customer?
Great question. And I think of this as a force multiplier. And that's a term that I heard a few weeks ago at a loss prevention conference. And in order to do this right, it's not about leaning so far into one experience or swinging the pendulum so far the other way. It's allowing employees to do what they need to do more effectively, more quickly, and also giving options to the customer. I was one of Matt's comments earlier in the conversation, and I feel very much the same way about optionality. And right now, the thing that is top of mind when you think of optionality is the checkout experience. We're seeing more and more self-checkout, and that's all to drive a more frictionless experience. And we're seeing great innovation with grab and go and just walk out. In beauty and cosmetics, for example, Armani Beauty and L'Oreal have done some great things in Germany in 2023 and in late 2022 in terms of pop-up stores where you just grab and go. And increasingly with apparel, you're seeing that in stadiums more and more. So I think it's about finding ways to do this in a way that is consistent with the expectation of the customer, and putting technology and choices in the hands of both the customer and the associate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, sometimes it's really easy for retailers to just get stuck on what everyone else is doing and try to catch up to that, right? Because they think it's the new benchmark or the new expectation, but it truly goes back to what the customer needs and what that journey is and what the employee needs ultimately too. Andrew, any follow-on thoughts there? Any insights or recommendations on how retailers can strike that balance effectively?
Yeah, I just pick up on something that Marshall said. I mean, isn't it the most frustrating thing? I'm sure we've all experienced it, whether it's in a retail store or typically in a restaurant, where in a restaurant we finish the meal and we want to pay and we can't because there's nobody. It happened to me the other day. I think I had to ask 3 times, could you bring the bill, please, and that sort of thing. I remember going in also a couple of years back, buying a Christmas present in the store. It's a fashion stroke gym exercise brand with quite a few L's in the name, so we know. And it was a fantastic experience. It was almost like there's a concierge service at the door. Great, right? I want to buy whatever it was, some leggings, I think, for my wife. And they showed me, handed me over to another store associate who took me through the whole thing and so on. Brilliant, great. But when it came to pay, there was nobody around, and it was the most frustrating thing. So to give an example of that and to kind of tie in the technology and employee end user devices, if you're familiar with the luggage brand Away, they're amazing. A few years ago, I bought a case from them from their London store. And the thing that struck me was I dealt with one store associate and they had a tablet and they used that to do the product discovery, share that with me. They used it to the inventory check. Yes, fine. Yes, we've got that size and color and spec and so on and so forth. And the same person with the same device standing in the middle practically of the store took the payment as well. It was just, we talk about frictionless, we talk about seamless, and I think sometimes it's a bit of a misnomer, but this was just a very easy, fulfilling almost, I'd say, experience. And you think, well, wow, yes, that was easy. They took care of me. They knew what the product was about. They established my need, all these sort of good things that we now, I think, expect when we walk into any store. So yeah, that was to your point that you made, Alicia, about, I think you call it the silent enabler. And I think that is a very good way to describe tech, in-store tech. That's what it's got to be. The brand and the human first, and the tech is the enabler.
Yeah, great.
Alicia,
and then, go ahead, Marshall.
I could jump in quickly. There's a term called liquid expectations that refers to that really describe exactly the phenomenon that Andrew was talking about, where you're experiencing a certain type of experience or a degree of efficiency and intuitiveness that you come to expect in other parts of your life and in other places where you go or you shop, etc. And I think that's happening in a large way. And checkout and that experience is just one of several examples.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there are a few different ways where that can be applied. Andrew, in your case with the Way, it was the employee holding the tablet, kind of guiding you through that experience. I know we have seen some movement in, touchscreen digital signage, even kiosks. And again, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing, it seems, from you all. It's more so aligning appropriately based on that touch point, what the intention is, and what both sides can get out of that. But Matt, I would love for you to, expand upon, how everyone watching this right now, retailers in general, how they can envision the true opportunities here for their brand. Because I do think that we've talked about a few different levels here. We've talked about the operational, like nuts and bolts, keep the store going. But then there is like the higher up you go, it's creating those deep connections with the brand, with the product, and of course, with the associate. So how do you explore how that vast opportunity?
So as a supplier of technology to the industry, I'm going to say something that probably would surprise a few people, which is don't start with the technology. If you think about the technology adoption curve, sometimes we automatically gravitate towards that and we want the shiniest new thing that's on the market. We've also got to take into account that there is a consumer adoption curve, and that is different from the technology curve, and it usually runs quite a bit behind. And as a retailer, you need to understand where do I want my curve to sit in terms of consumer adoption and technology. So that would be my first statement. I think my second statement would be, don't put technology for technology's sake into your store, but really start with, I think the one thing that we've come to is that you cannot remove the human element from any of these interactions. So start with your consumer, start with your member of staff. Work out the journeys of both, work out the interaction and inflection points of both, work out the friction points. So what am I as a retailer trying to solve in my store? Is it I got a queuing problem? Is it I have a staff availability problem? Is it I've got a mismatch of expectations of experience? Is it I need more help in the fitting room? Identifying those friction points really is the compass to really tell you what technology you need to put into your store, and more importantly, how to operationalize it. The next thing I would say is look at your data. So it sounds really boring, but there are a lot of insights that you can gather by looking at historical transactional data, customer data, and even staffing data to really understand how are my stores actually running. And if you put the three of those elements together, I think it allows you to create a white paper blueprint to say, well, what do I want the experience in my store to be? What options and choice do I want to give consumers? How do I want to enable my staff to serve consumers in the best way? And then look for the best technology to underpin and support those journeys. So it's very much a kind of consultative process that I would follow. Understand your consumer, understand your staff, understand your friction points, analyze your data, and then choose the right technology to support that.
Amazing. Very comprehensive. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I totally agree with that. And the technology needs to be aligned with the brand and the brand values. So that comes first. I would just sort of closing from me, I want to just quickly go back to the comments made earlier about fitting rooms. If I'm a fashion retail business, I think, okay, so how can we improve our stores? I would say, well, you could do a lot worse than start with the fitting rooms, because I think you mentioned it earlier, Alicia, and you're absolutely right. The fitting room experience in the majority of fashion retail businesses is pretty appalling. And apart from the fact that it's pretty poor at the moment, that's where I mentioned conversion earlier. That's a huge conversion driver. Make it the best place in the store. And I don't just mean fit some smart mirrors in there and so on and so forth. There's a very quickly company who I came across when I was in the US recently at a conference and so on. I was talking to an outfit called Avery. And Avery founder, Megan, she said that and you can see this on the website, she said that she had a defeating dressing room experience. Now, doesn't go on to elaborate on what defeating means, but let's say it wasn't a very good dressing room. And so I think they've got just over 100 stores in their estate across the US now. And one of the things that they focused on is the fitting room, making it the most pleasant environment possible. And yes, that does include some tech so if you haven't got the right color, the right size, then you can order it. You don't have to dress and walk out again or shout over to somebody. But yeah, make it the most pleasant environment you possibly can.
Yeah, well, that's where the technology plus the design comes into play. And I think that's one thing, obviously, we didn't get to today because this is a tech-driven conversation, but we're seeing so many more store design teams, visual merchandising folks really have a seat at the table here and talk about what does this look like in context of the bigger brand story, the mission. Andrew, to your point, the values, like Good American, they're all about inclusivity, making your customer feel seen, heard, that they can express themselves through fashion. If their fitting room experience or their store experience doesn't reflect that, then it's like, why even bother? Marshall, we're just about at time, but I want you to weigh in on any final closing thoughts, recommendations, as folks explore these new opportunities that exist.
Yeah, here's a quick one. So retail CEOs typically talk about wanting their store associates to have the tools needed to do their job properly. And I think there's a gap now between what is really needed by associates and what is viewed as good enough. And I think closing that gap will be an imperative for retailers because the cost of not moving quickly enough will be greater than they might realize.
So really, yeah, really, really great closing point. And I know we had a few questions that we could not get to, folks. I apologize. We had so much to talk about. But if you do have questions after the fact, feel free to keep those coming through on LinkedIn or wherever you're watching this. We'll make sure the panelists get back to you. Or, of course, please add them on LinkedIn. We're all about community here and just making sure that those conversations take place. So again, leave your comments, leave your questions. Someone will get back to you, and always feel free to connect with us. Thanks again to our incredible panelists. So many great insights, such great food for thought. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.